Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the recently released Control and see how it compares both visually and from a gameplay perspective to Remedy's previous action-adventure title, Quantum Break. For this comparison, both titles are being played on the PC with all the graphical settings turned up as high as possible at a 1440p resolution. However, to improve image clarity, the film grain options will be disabled in both games. Also, while Control does feature NVIDIA's new RTX ray tracing effects to simulate real-time reflective surfaces, I'm only going to keep this option enabled when discussing the lighting effects, but we'll disable the feature when discussing other aspects, in order to improve the fluidity of the image, and cut out any odd shadow-based artifacting that seems to present itself with ray tracing enabled. Alright, so to kick this comparison off, let's first start by looking at the playable main characters in both games, and how animations, textures, and overall model complexity have improved, if at all. The first thing that you'll notice, aside from the fact that they're entirely different models, is that the actual resolution of the character itself has been improved upon. When the characters are placed at identical distances from the player camera, I found that Jack from Quantum Break appears much more blurry, with less defined details, especially around the face. Jesse from Control, however, appears much more clearly, with each strand of hair being clearly defined without any sort of blur effect. This increased sharpness, however, does result in some slight aliasing, though it is difficult to spot without zooming in significantly. As far as animations go, it's difficult to say one is really better than the other. Both characters move very realistically, with motion that appears natural to their individual characteristics. However, one big takeaway is how the jumping is handled. The jumping animation in Quantum Break feels very clumsy and awkward at times, though it does feel like Remedy was aiming for a more realistic look. With Control, however, Jesse can jump much higher, despite the hang time being roughly the same. This allows for better control for the platforming heavy sections of the game, a feature that is in Quantum Break but not quite as much. Next, let's talk about the environments. Now, this one is a bit more challenging to compare. While both games share some striking similarities in terms of their general concepts and mechanics, the settings are still drastically different. The environments in Quantum Break feature more industrial areas like gritty alleys, warehouses, and shipping yards, while the world of Control takes place primarily in a large office building, with several interconnected hallways, meeting rooms, and various maintenance areas. Both these settings play a key role in developing the character behind these two games. Quantum Break's messy shipyards and back alleys provide the perfect setting for chaos to unfold with its time-breaking plotline. Massive construction sites, scaffolding, and shipping crates make for unique obstacles, with plenty of color variation to really help the world of Quantum Break pop out, while also staying grounded in reality. Control, on the other hand, takes a far more artistic approach to its environmental design. The offices of the FBC headquarters building help to invoke a claustrophobic feel, and as players travel deeper into the offices, the walls literally feel like they're closing in on you, with the control point takeovers helping to create some space as a sigh of relief. It's a brilliant design that's also very well decorated. Each and every room is filled with dynamic props like piles of papers, desks, chairs, books, computers, and plenty of unique personal items to help sell the idea that actual people work here. Quantum Break doesn't necessarily have a chance to feature this level of depth, though it does still provide a substantial amount of detail, making every environment feel like it could truly exist. As far as textures go, Control has a significant step up, thanks to its much clearer overall image presentation. There's not really any textures that can be easily compared here, but the general quality of textures appears to be much better in Control. Quantum Break, for whatever reason, has a terribly implemented depth of field effect that seems to blur objects incorrectly all the time. It's difficult to get textures to focus properly, and there doesn't seem to be any available graphical options in the menus to help clear it up. Lighting, on the other hand, looks great in both games. Both titles feature impressive volumetric lighting effects, including plenty of examples of exaggerated god rays and realistic global illumination. Thanks to Quantum Break's focus on time travel, there's several scenes throughout the game where the lighting changes rapidly, showcasing some excellent real-time shadow projections and an expert understanding of how lighting can affect the coloration of an environment. Control's lighting appears to borrow the same technical specifications, though the more limited setting does limit its overall potential. Environments are typically shades of white, black, and red, though on occasion there are unusual visions that bring players to unique settings that demonstrate the game's excellent range. The one thing that I will say about both games is that the bloom effect does come into play a bit too drastically, with details often being drowned out by light reflected off of objects whose materials shouldn't reflect nearly as much. But of course, this is assuming you're using the standard screen space reflections. Control is one of the very few games available today that benefits from NVIDIA's RTX-based ray tracing effects. Assuming your computer is up to the task, Control has the capacity to display incredibly lifelike lighting and reflection effects. Things like glass walls and dimly lit hallways and even pictures mounted on the wall reflect the game world in real time, giving Control a massive step up over its predecessor. Shadows have also been improved upon a great deal in Control. While the edges of character shadows still feature a slight shimmer, shadow projections in general are far more consistent than in Quantum Break, where I found multiple instances where the game world's lighting effects failed to project shadows at all. A pretty surprising omission considering the linear nature of the game, and the already excellent lighting design. Next up, let's talk special effects. If there's anything Remedy does better than anyone else in the industry, it's physics. This company has a long history of incredible physics-based gameplay, including the original Max Payne games, Alan Wake, and more recently, Quantum Break and Control. Both of these games feature an incredible amount of props in the environment that react realistically to both player and AI interaction, not only making the worlds feel more real, but also helping to make intense action sequences more chaotic and intense. Bullets rip through soft cover, splintering things like tables and chairs, while books and other small pieces of debris will litter the scene. Control seems to take this a bit further, with much larger environments populated by even more dynamic props. Players can even use their powers to throw larger objects directly at enemies, and the highlighting UI helps to showcase just how many dynamic props are available in every scene. Quantum Break has some similar features, like powerful blasts of energy that can cause objects to fly in the air, but the unique time-stopping storyline allows for some truly unique scenarios, where hundreds of dynamic props will freeze in the air, allowing players to gently walk through them. The unique powers and abilities in Remedy's games help to really showcase their impressive physics technology, and it's great to see the team push the boundaries in terms of what's possible, with tables featuring more breakaway points and the number of props being increased. Other effects like explosions and fire have also seen some slight improvements in Control, with the resolution of the fireballs being increased slightly, as they appeared slightly blurred in Quantum Break, and fire appears more natural. Now, I wanted to detail exactly how these two games differ in terms of gameplay. Despite both these games looking incredibly similar from a distance, there's actually quite a few subtle nuances that help set them apart. First off, as I stated before, Control's experience takes place in a more open-ended office building. This setting provides opportunities for players to backtrack to previously visited locations and explore secret optional paths. Quantum Break, on the other hand, is designed to be incredibly scripted and linear. The game is broken up into chapters and acts, with players needing to defeat groups of enemies in between long, slow-paced narrative pieces and even longer cutscenes. Control is designed to put gameplay first, with the narrative appearing far more vague and players capable of creating their own experience. Upon being killed in Control, players are returned to the closest captured control point, as opposed to just reloading from a checkpoint like in Quantum Break. This means that groups of enemies that have already been defeated will remain defeated, cutting down on needless repetition. In terms of actual combat, the two games differ drastically. Quantum Break's combat is based heavily around taking cover and flanking enemies using time-bending powers. Powers include dashing forward, creating temporary shields, and blasting enemies away. To take cover, the player model will automatically crouch down when near a waist-high object during a combat scenario, removing the need to press a specific button to hide. Control, on the other hand, seems to emphasize fighting out in the open. You can still crouch down behind cover to avoid gunfire, but it requires a specific button press to crouch now, and there's no real reason to. The player in Control is given a unique shape-shifting gun that can transform into different weapon types like pistols and shotguns on the fly, and instead of ammunition like Quantum Break, the weapons in Control operate on a cooldown, similar to the weapons in EA's Star Wars Battlefront. Control's powers are also slightly different. Players can manipulate the environment much more, and can grab large pieces of the world and throw them directly at enemies. Players can dash forward, but it doesn't operate exactly the same as in Quantum Break. Another big change here is that Control no longer features health regen, at least not by default. Instead of hiding around a corner for the health to regenerate, players now need to grab health from defeated enemies, encouraging a more direct approach to combat. This greatly mixes up the feel of enemy encounters, and encourages more creative uses of various unlocked powers. Players can upgrade these powers in both games using components found in the game worlds. Control, however, goes for a bit more of an RPG approach. Enemies have health bars, difficulty gradings, and there's tons of components hidden around the world that can be used to craft upgrades and attachments. This allows players to create new weapon types for the shape-shifting gun to turn into, in addition to special mods for both the weapons and for the player. On top of this, players can also visit captured control points and upgrade their powers in a skill tree using unlocked skill points. Control's gameplay overall is much more open-ended and features far more RPG-based elements than its predecessor. and its increased focus on the gameplay experience over the narrative gives it a more engaging experience, along with more potential replayability. Finally, let's listen to a few sound comparisons. Now, we can't compare identical weapons or scenarios here as they're both drastically different experiences, so I'm just going to play a few combat scenarios that are somewhat similar in both games. Based on things like reverb and range of audio from props in the environment, which game do you think has the better overall sound design?
HQ, hostile in sight, over.
Shit.
Jack, jump.
And that wraps up this episode of Direct Comparison. Overall, Control feels like a significant step forward from Remedy's last outing. Everything from the clarity of the picture, the complexity of the environments, and the more refined gameplay experience helped to greatly improve on what was done in Quantum Break. On top of this, Control also features much better performance, an issue that still plagues the PC port of Quantum Break. But what do you guys think? Do you like the direction Remedy took with Control, or did you prefer the visuals and gameplay design of Quantum Break? Let me know in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.